Hi, guys. I'm Rachel Childers. I'm playing the Boston Symphony, and I teach at New England Conservatory.
We usually start kind of just at the beginning of your musical life and ask how you got into the horn or into music and what your early influences were.
I started, I think, like a lot of people, I started on piano. My dad comes from a line of amateur and church pianists, and I think the story is that I was begging for lessons my whole life, and finally my parents acquiesced at like 7 and let me start taking piano lessons. So I got my start there. It wasn't Suzuki style, it was reading music right away. And I had a fabulous piano teacher who let me kind of play the music that I really loved right away. My dad played a lot of Scott Joplin. Like growing up, that was like what was playing in my house. So I, of course, wanted to play ragtime, and my teacher and my dad would help me like because ragtime is all lots of, I don't know if you guys play piano, lots of octaves, and when you're little your hand isn't big enough, so I had all these like modifications to like play my favorite tunes. So it was really a fun way to start learning music. I think like everybody, you're in it, not because you're not necessarily because your band director handed you an instrument, but um, because you're drawn to it. So that's how I got started, and then I got handed an instrument. Um, in fourth grade, I started playing horn, and that was kind of the result of having a good ear, having some good musical training on piano. We had to take like a ear test, and they had a little record player, and they were like, "What is this pitch higher or lower? Is this faster or slower?" Like for a 9-year-old, kind of tricky questions, and I did a good job on it. And so they gave me a printout of like what instruments would be best, and if I wanted to play a brass instrument, I was horn, and if I wanted to play woodwind, I should have played oboe, and then cello for string. And I have no idea like how that actually works, but they kind of decided. And the brass day tryout instruments was first for brass, and my band director handed me a mouthpiece and I could make a buzz, and he goes, "Great, you're playing horn." and I didn't know anything about it, but it was shiny, and the school had just gotten like new model horns, so they were like pristine. And there were 3 other girls that played horn with me, and our band director, Mr. McQueen, said, he goes, "Horn is the hardest instrument there is." And he's like, "But I think you all are so smart, and you're going to do really well. And what I need from you is to take lessons this first year." And he said, "I have a college student. He's going to teach lessons." Everybody had to sign up. And so I started lessons right away. And I had that kind of, at least for me, it was a push, like saying, "This is kind of hard, but it's worth it, and I think you can do it." So I had really supportive teachers right from the get-go. And then, of course, like I heard my teacher play horn, and I was like, "Holy cow, like that's an amazing sound. I want to do that." And that was the bug for me, wanting to make that sound. It took like a really long time before I could make that sound, but it was fun. It was good to work for.
Yeah, and so then like how far along in your horn playing did you decide that it was something you really wanted to pursue in like college and beyond?
Well, I think, all along, I think when I started playing piano, I was like, I want to do this. This is it. And then I like sang pretty competitively for a while, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And then I picked up horn, and I was like, this is it. Like I always kind of knew that I wanted something to do with that. I wasn't sure what that was. I thought I wanted to play in an orchestra, but I didn't really have an idea of what that was like. I didn't grow up in a musical family in that sense, where my parents played in an orchestra. They're, vocational singers, and my dad played, piano and drums, but I didn't really know what that meant as a career. But but I knew that I wanted to have something to do with that. I had other interests as well, but by the time I got to college, um, I knew in high school that I wanted to major in music, and I thought I also wanted to do a double major. So I started out as that, but like failed to really pick anything that really matched what I was doing in college. I thought it was like really exciting to have a narrow focus on music in undergrad. I really enjoyed that part of it. Um, so I never really pursued anything else. I have 3 degrees in performance.
What else were you interested like when you were thinking about double majoring? What was kind
Well,
of
I really loved physics, and I had thought that I might want to be some kind of engineer. But as it turns out, I really also appreciated um, not working too hard in college on that kind of stuff. So that's awful, right? But I was, one of those students that I I enjoyed classes. Like I thought academics were really great in high school, but I never felt really super passionate about it. So,
yes.
but as it turns out, I did, I've done lots of things in my life that aren't music, um, that that have kind of fulfilled that part of my interests.
I was kind of doing some reading up about you and I saw some things that were like, oh, this is really cool. We should ask her about this. So you went to University of Michigan
Mm-hmm.
for your bachelor's and your master's,
Yep.
and then you went to Colburn for your AD. Can you explain a little bit about your experience at Colburn and then what else you were doing at Colburn besides just playing French horn?
Sure. Okay, so I did get my 2 degrees from Michigan, which is like a huge school. The music school itself is actually rather big, and I was not looking to go to Colburn, but my one of my big mentors was the bassoon professor at the University of Michigan, and um, I ran into him over the summer, and he said, listen, we have an opening at Colburn. We haven't filled it for horn. Would you be interested? And at the time, I said, of course. I'm going to stay in Michigan. The plan was to stay in Michigan and um, teach at some small colleges and kind of gig around and take auditions. Like I was just going to, take that path for a while. But I had heard about Colburn. It was like the first class of wind players there. So they, had just started. And of course, I was excited to go. So I auditioned for Mr. Jolly, who was my teacher at Colburn, and 2 weeks later moved to LA. It was very fast. And at Michigan, I was kind of, top of the heap, horn playing wise, and like, I felt I was like, pretty great. And I got to Colburn, and I was like underwater, like trying to catch up with people. It was like phenomenal and humbling, and like a time in my life where I really grew just incredibly fast. At the time there were all these string players that were like, they seemed so like young and just ridiculous. It was so fun. Like the orchestra was the best orchestra I had played in, even like the professional playing work I had done in Michigan. And it was like these phenomenal kids in a beautiful hall, and at the time the wind players were mostly grad students or like me, like post grad. And it was amazing place for me. I was always playing catch up, and I was like thrilled to be in that position. It was like really, really a great place for me. Yeah, I just from going from big university, big picture, to like really small, like helped me like narrow my focus so much. And an environment like that where it's kind of everything is done for you, the concept of having all the tuition and the room and board and all of that done for you it's huge in terms of like financial impact, of course, like not coming out of school with huge debt. But also while you're there, it frees you up to do your very best, which I think is like obviously the whole point. And for me, it really worked. The funny thing is that when I got there, my husband, my now husband, and I moved out together, and we couldn't stay in the dorms. And Colburn was very nice and like helped us a little bit with room and board costs, but being Los Angeles, it like didn't cover everything. So kind of right away, had to make the decision if I was going to work part-time. And at the time it was, I don't know if it's still the case, but I couldn't take out more loans because the school, because there was some situation, like I had to start paying my school loans off from Michigan, and I had to, I didn't feel comfortable like taking more. So I had to get another job, which was really, really great. It worked out well. I mean, luckily I play horn and not a string instrument, so I can't practice 8 hours a day. I don't think that would have been really feasible, but I ended up getting a job as an institutional researcher at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, which is in downtown Los Angeles. And it started out as just a data entry job. I'm actually a good typist. My dad's a computer guy, and so I just got, kind of an easy job of like inputting student surveys, right? And back in those days, like people like hand wrote them, like surveys of teachers, and then you had to like, input them all and do analysis in order to get, the results. And so that was my job, just like stacks of paper, like just typing. And it was very easy. I loved it. But then like as time went on at Colburn, like I got more involved with my job there. So I ended up getting kind of promoted and doing more analysis. And at the time, we spent 4 years in LA, and my job was really wonderful and flexible with going to take auditions. And, by the end of my 4 years there, I was playing all over California. And so I could take my work with me. And I think at the time I was doing between 30 and 40 hours of work a week at FITM, and doing everything else. It was kind of a big hustle, but it was really great.
Yeah, how did you balance all of that? I mean, like gigging and everything.
I think when you're in your 20s and you're doing everything you can to like advance yourself, you're in a position where you're saying yes to everything, right? You're very used to carving out as much time to either make interesting opportunities or make money for yourself, right? And kind of get that stability. So I look back on it now, and my husband and I laugh. We're like, we didn't see each other for like 3 weeks, at a time, because I would, I'd go to Colburn for rehearsal and practice, then I'd go down to FITM, and then I'd go somewhere for a gig. And I would, see him like at 10 o'clock at night. And he was doing the same thing on the other end, working. He had the brutal end of it. He worked at UPS in the morning. So he'd like wake up early in the morning and go unload like a big box truck at UPS, and then come home and go to his other job, and then go play gigs at night. It's just crazy time that you like, it's okay to do when you're younger, I think. And yeah, there wasn't a lot of balance, but it was really fun. Like, you're living in a big city, you get to meet lots of interesting people. The jobs you're doing are a huge variety of things, right? I played, well, I won't get into that. I played some really funny gigs.
Yeah, you live the true LA life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's great that people need to hear that someone like you did the grind, because sometimes we don't know that, but it's, it's kind of like a rite of passage. And I think it's important that people know that even the ones with the big jobs also went through that process.
Right. Well, I don't know if it's still the same way. I always felt that there were people who like thought you weren't successful if you had to do that. And I think that's not true at all. Like some people are really lucky and they get that job, that stable job, right out of school. But you know, you could still be successful and have to do all of those things, right? And I think for most of us, that's what you have to do. You know, when you get out of school, you know, you have to put your life together in a way that you still can like get to where you want professionally, but that you're happy with what you're doing and you're growing and you're making enough money to like not just survive, but like move on to the next level. I mean, this is not an easy way to make a career. Like, to get the job, you have to spend money. You have to go take auditions. You have to take lessons. You have to have your instrument, and it has to be in good working order. And it's, you know, it's all of these things. Like, you sacrifice all these things and put so much toward it for, you know, in like the orchestral world, like 5 minutes of playing in front of a committee. It's so brutal. Yet so many of us do it. It seems kind of silly at some point, right?
Yeah, so speaking of auditions, read in one of your bios that you took 30 auditions before you won the Colorado Symphony job.
Yeah, I started taking auditions when I was 19, which was
Okay.
too early.
Hmm.
My first audition was actually Colorado Symphony. And I took my mom. My mom and I flew there together, which was, you know, a lovely time to spend with her, but like not that helpful for preparing for an audition and really focusing. So that didn't go well. but but you know, like every audition like counts for something, even if it's, you know, the local, you know, 5 concert series orchestra like in your local town. Like, those kinds of things were so useful in learning how to take an audition. Those are skills that you can practice at school, right? You can practice taking mock auditions and playing for people, but until you actually do it and have that investment, I don't think there's any real way to learn how to do that other than actually doing it. So lots of times people say like, I don't want to audition until I'm ready, and I took the other approach, which was perhaps uh, silly. I don't know. But, you know, like, you have to learn how to do it. So I think that's important. So I took lots of auditions for various size orchestras. The BSO was actually the biggest audition I took. I think I took San Francisco and what else? But but that was like the biggest job that I took. I didn't think it was really like a possibility for me to win. Um, so, you know, I just think I always tell my students, like, you have to take whatever's out there. You just have to do it. Like, if you really want to do this as a job, like, you have to be available.
Hmm. Kind of going off of that, do you think part of that is desensitizing yourself to any feelings of failure or anything? Like, how do you do that process in terms of like your definition of success, or did you feel like that changed because you took so many auditions?
Well, I think so. I mean, you know, taking audition, you're almost guaranteed to fail, right? And you have to grow a thick skin, right? To survive that and then come out the other end and work harder for the next one. You have to learn to not take it personally. And I think, you know, I play horn, so I miss notes a lot. So I don't take that personally ever, or try not to. And the same thing goes with auditions. Like, sometimes I don't know if it's a matter of luck, but it's a matter of fit, right? If you go to an audition and you present yourself at 100% you, and they like it and it's a good fit, then that's great. And sometimes it's not. And sometimes you just don't represent yourself as well as you could. And that's just brutal, right? And so that's part of it. That's part of learning to take auditions and learning how to structure your preparation ahead of time so that you are kind of peaking at the right time, right? You're not. And I was always so superstitious. I didn't want to sound my best 2 weeks before an audition, because I was like, that's too soon. I am not going to be able to like maintain that. It's gonna dip, and then I want to catch it again. But, you know, I was always hoping for, hitting that sweet spot, right?
So you said that the you weren't expecting to win the BSO, or that was kind of like a dream situation for you. So can you explain like what that was like for you, the process, and then winning the job, and after winning, like what was that like for you?
Sure. Well, I'll start with a little, downsizing my ego a bit. I had taken San Diego Symphony a year before BSO and was one of the final people standing. And so that job came open again, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take it. And I was basically like, oh, this is my job to say yes or no to. And I had to play the prelims again because that was the rules down in San Diego. And this was 2 weeks before the BSO, and it didn't go well. Like I think I played okay, but I didn't move past the prelims in a job that I was assuming was basically mine, which totally sucked. And then I took BSO, which was a totally different position. I think San Diego was the assistant horn, so it was a lot of first horn excerpts. And I hadn't really started working on the BSO list except for the things that were really unfamiliar. So I just had 2 weeks to prep for that. But I had been, up until San Diego, I had been doing really well in auditions. And so I had this kind of momentum going for preparation. And I remember my husband, Sam, who, of course had heard me practicing all this time. He's like, I'm feeling really good about this one. He's like, I think this is going to be the one. And I was like, no, you're crazy. And our little flip phones both broke at the same time. This was 2010, and the iPhone had just come out, and we went to the store to get new phones, and we couldn't afford anything but the free one, right? So we got the new free one, and we agreed that if I won Boston Symphony, we would get iPhones, which was pie in the sky, kind of just, it felt really crazy. And sure enough, I won the job, and Sam picked me up from the airport. And he took me to rehearsal because I had a red-eye flight and I had to go to rehearsal the next morning. And I walked in, and my horn section was like, oh my God, what are you doing here? They sent me home. I was so bleary-eyed, not really with it. And sure enough, I took a nap, and then we went to Verizon and got iPhones. Which, is pretty silly, but that's where we were. We didn't have financial freedom. We were doing, as you said, the grind and working hard. So yeah, the audition in BSO, was much like any other audition. They do it really nicely here, where it's, you have to send a tape. If your resume is not quite impressive enough, you have to send a tape, and they say yes or no, you can come. So I had to do that, and I got there, and just, I think I just hit my stride, and it felt really great. And the hall here is amazing to play in. I think it's hard to sound bad in this hall. So that was really nice. Everything about it, it felt right. And I remember after the semifinals, after the first round of finals, when they do a second round, and the screen can come down if people on the committee choose. And in my case, half the committee decided to stay behind the screen. They didn't want to know who I was, but half of them did come out so that we could play a section round together. But I remember we were playing, or I was doing some more excerpts, and I was playing a Mahler, maybe Mahler 3 or Mahler 5, I can't remember. And it wasn't loud enough. And the principal trumpet, Tom Rolfs, kept on saying, he's like, it just needs to be louder. Can it just be louder? And the people who were in front of the screen, he kept on saying it. I kept on playing. I was getting close to the red zone. And they made him come to the front of the stage because they're like, it's loud, Tom. You don't understand. It is actually loud. And they like carried him like blindfolded to the front of the stage so he didn't have to see me. And then finally he acquiesced and was like, okay, fine. It's loud enough. But I had to play this darn thing, like same excerpt 4 or 5 times. Just louder and louder and louder. And I was like, I can't go much louder. Like, if this is the hill I die on, that's okay.
Well, actually, that says a lot about the difference between what's happening on stage and what's happening behind the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little scary, actually.
It's true. I mean, you guys know, like, you play directional instruments. Like, they're not going to sound the same all the way around. So, what are you going to do? You have to understand that at some point. But
At least you had people to back you up on stage.
goodness, right? It was that round and not maybe like a prelim round where nobody had a different perspective, right? So
Also, kind of in the same about your audition and winning it, it was such a big deal, and there's so much attention to you because you were the first woman or you are the first woman in the brass section. Did you feel like any pressure because of that, or what was that experience like for you?
well, stupidly, I did not do what what people advise students to do and like really research the orchestra and know what you're getting yourself into. And I had no idea that there were no women in the brass section. I didn't study in Boston, clearly, and it wasn't really like my hometown orchestra. So I had a vague conception of who was in it, but I didn't really know. So I won the job, and, backstage people say, congratulations, and, they want to hang out. And I remember the personnel manager and the president of the orchestra at the time, they were like, oh, marketing is going to be so excited. They're like, did you know? And everyone was genuinely just so happy, I think, like relieved to be able to, like, I don't know, cross it off the list or like finally have somebody there. I mean, they've, for a long time have had really wonderful female brass players subbing, and in the Esplanade Orchestra there's been lots of females, but never like fully in the BSO. And even just a couple years before that, like New York Phil had just had their first female musicians in the brass section. So it has taken a while. So yeah, that was really interesting experience. Also because I had never been the only woman. Like, it's always been like equally distributed. So it was an interesting experience to think about that, and also have to be nervous about starting my job, and also be expected to speak eloquently about my gender in orchestra. I was not prepared to do that. I think that everybody meant well, but in my first couple weeks, I was put in a position of talking to newspapers and radio and having to speak about it. And it was just, I think I'd be better prepared now, obviously. It's tricky position.
Well, that's a huge role that you had to take on, like kind of out of the blue,
Mm-hmm.
that you weren't even expecting, to be able to have to speak to that after it not even being on your radar. That's really difficult.
Right. And it's a balance. Luckily, when I started, I got letters from several horn players in the area, or people who had studied in Boston who like didn't go on professionally, women who were a generation or two ahead of me, who wrote these amazing letters like, congratulations, we're so excited, like this has been a dream for a long time. And people saying like, don't forget, like this is what I went through, this is why I couldn't have done this if I were in your shoes. It's a real reminder of exactly how hard people had worked so that I could be here. And it felt like the suffragists, like so far in history that like not really directly connected to me. So being as Elizabeth Rowe says, like being an only was not something I had thought was even going to be my fate, right?
On top of a very demanding job and
Yeah.
such a switch. Can you also talk about that in terms of like coming from, as we talked about, like the grind of doing the auditions and then having this job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky. I get to sit next to like amazing people day in and day out and play in an amazing hall. Like, I think once you get over the shock of that, it's really just it's easy. And everyone told me, I remember, like as you win better and better jobs and you play with better people, better musicians, people who play together a long time, it just gets easier. And that's so true. Like, you're what you're hearing is so polished usually and coherent. And in an orchestra like BSO, there's a way that people do things and it's unspoken. And if you have ears and a brain, you can like fit right in, right? You kind of hear what's going on and like you make decisions to like step right in and just get into the current, right? So that part, once I got over my nerves, I think in the first few weeks, I remember my first week was playing chamber orchestra with Anne-Sophie Mutter doing all of the Mozart violin concertos, conductorless, like she was the conductor. And so, I mean, you guys know the Mozart wind parts are so light and exposed and simple, right? They just have to be perfect. in all regards, and if it's perfect, nobody really notices and it's just lovely. So that was just the most terrifying thing, playing with all new people, and like half the stage there was, it felt like there were four people on the stage with me. And that was scary first week. And then the next week we did a piece that's never come back, Bartok's The Wooden Prince, which in the first 10 bars starts out with like a 45-second horn solo. Really exposed. And so that was something. And then the third week, I think it was either Brahms 1 or Brahms 3. I think it was Brahms 3. And then finally that moment I like knew what was going on. I had like swallowed some of my nerves. And hearing a great orchestra play Brahms, like it's something. So from then on I felt much more comfortable. I was able to actually like hear what was going on rather than my own just blood rushing to my head. So yeah, from there it was great. And then once you settle in, it's just really fun. And I got good feedback from my colleagues. They were all very helpful. I think I don't know if that's always the case for people starting new jobs. It just happened that that people were very kind, and I didn't have any problems with tenure. People were happy with what was going on, and I'm a Midwesterner, and I sit in the second horn chair, which means that it's a good fit because I'm naturally like a not a people pleaser, but like I like it when things run smoothly, and I try not to cause problems. Sometimes I do, but not very often. And so I think it's good to have a personality that can help diffuse or help communicate in a way that is like clear and easygoing, right? Not problem causing, for sure.
Especially as the new person who needs tenure, for sure.
Right. It's real hard I think for when you have a strong personality and you are expected to not have one. It's hard to swallow that during your tenure year. And whether or not that's fair is a totally different story. But I think a lot of people feel the pressure to be a muted version of themselves in order to obtain tenure, which is It's not that nice, right?
Yeah, so I read that you did the BSO in Residence project,
Oh,
and I was wondering if we could hear more about that.
yeah. So, well, I'll go back to why I was involved with that. When I got the job in BSO, I was so excited. I had done a lot of work with the LA Philharmonic in their education department. I was a teaching artist there, and I loved that work. I thought that when I moved to LA, I stopped teaching private lessons. I had done a lot of private lessons in Michigan, and I always I hated the feeling of teaching a bunch of students and feeling like I only really motivated a handful of them, right? It felt the disconnect there between like giving my time to people and like feeling like it was like not unequally received, but like not very valuable in some certain circumstances. So I stopped teaching privately entirely. And when the opportunity came to audition to be a teaching artist at the LA Phil, my friend Tim Hagen, who was a flute player and like this kind of huge teaching personality, like just an amazing connector of people. He's like, you should do this. This is really fun work. You get to go all around and teach kids, but in classrooms, like classroom teaching. And so I auditioned and I got trained and I just loved it. I thought it was, first of all, it felt like a really valuable thing to do. It was in schools that did not have strong general music programs or even general music at all or instrumental programs. They were really looking to augment education for kids who didn't have it. So underserved schools and underserved populations. And we got to go in and do like a long curriculum with students based around an LAFL concert. And it really struck me that that was a really great way to spend my time and energy, is, learning one lesson and teaching it to 6 or 8 or 10 classrooms of kids. I loved that. So when I got to BSO, my first day, I went up to the education department and I said, hey, I'm new here. Like, I really want to be involved, tell me what I can do. I love this kind of work. And apparently not everybody does that when they start at the BSO. And so, of course, the education department was like, yes, of course we'll use you. And so from day one, I've been involved with the education department. I'm on the education committee, and I say yes to anything they ask me to do. So we do things like, classroom visits and concerts in schools, and kind of what you would expect. And I love doing that. And part of the fun was getting started with this BSO in Residence project, where we had not like a drawing, but like different partner organizations throughout the city submitted on behalf of their neighborhood to be a partner with BSO in Residence. And it just so happened that they picked my town, which is Jamaica Plain, to be like the first partnership. And it was really fun. It ended up like we did concerts at my kids' school and like in my actual neighborhood. And it's been really interesting, I think. And also, perhaps like gets a little bit of the naivete off of it too for me, because it started out as this huge project that was going to be like rolling through many different cities or parts of the city. There was supposed to be, many more coming up. And the way it got started in the hall was, or in with the orchestra, in my opinion, it got kind of jump started in a way that was not super successful. Like trying to work with partners and create, like they wanted to make an interchange of ideas. And I think that was not super apparent to all of these partners that came to work with us, because BSO is, the big behemoth in town. And I think people were hoping for just like more concerts, like more of what we already do. And the BSO was like, well, we want to know what you want. Like, let's collaborate, let's do things differently. But like nobody really knew how to get that started and knew where people's comfort levels were. So it was not so successful in creating like some cool partnerships. What, at least not right away. I think this was like 4 years ago, maybe, that it started. And just now, like, I feel like we're we're figuring that out in a way that feels really interesting. So it's just, things take a lot of time, especially with organizations that are like have long standing in the community, and it's hard to get to change either people's perceptions of you or change the way you do things, right? We're so lucky in the BSO that we can fill a hall and do the same thing kind of, week in, week out, and year after year, that you don't really have to change. So there's that struggle there with what you say you want and then what actually works, right?
Yeah, can you talk more about like how, from your perspective in like an ideal world, how an organization like the Boston Symphony would interact with the community in a way that was meaningful? Like how you said that way didn't work out of the BSO, like wanting people to come and collaborate. Like how would that, do you think it could be best facilitated?
Well, I mean, it's so tricky, right? First of all, are you talking about the orchestra as a whole, like 90 plus people? Like, you can't like collaborate with like a dance studio with like 100 of us, right? So it very much has to be like something totally different right away. So then it turns into not really the BSO. It's like BSO musicians or collaborators, right? So getting kind of rid of that title that it's going to be the orchestra is tricky enough. One of the cool things we just did, actually, there's a local hip hop artist or hip hop group that approached the BSO. They happened to be like Jamaica Plain and Roxbury, but they approached the BSO and said like, hey, we're interested in collaborating. Like, what can we do this? And we had a whole like amazing thing planned at the hall, which of course was like supposed to be May of 2020. It didn't happen. But just like a couple weeks ago, I finally got to go into their studio to like record some things with other, well, it was just me by myself, but other members of the orchestra are collaborating with them. So it was really nice, but it takes a long time, right? That's a long time away. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but there are some little projects which are cool. What, it'd be so nice if people like thought of the orchestra. What we want, or what I want, is people to like feel proud of the orchestra and feel like it's like for them, whether or not they're musicians, whether or not they're donors or conservatory students. Like, I think it is for everybody. Like, we play music that people like, usually.
Yeah, well, this is like the big thing that a lot of orchestras are facing now, is like, how do we make the organization more valued in the community and connecting more within the community? And it, like you said, it's going to take time, and it seems like you guys are already, going that direction. So that's great.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I don't think that after this we can really go back to business as usual, right? I think there is going to be the expectation that we're reaching different communities and offering things to people that they say that they want. But I think it's really hard for organizations to like get that feedback and respond in a way that feels collaborative rather than like top down, hierarchical. And it's what, like, I mean, you guys like think that classical music is pretty great. And I do too, but some people don't. So how can you reach those people who think like, this is not for me? Right? It's got to be part of your mission, right? To like, at least help educate people and expose them, and then they can decide if they like it or not, right? But it's you getting the butts in the door that's really important. Getting like young people to hear it and doing, you know, adult education, and not just for the people who are already in it, right?
Yes.
Well, and I think like a place like Tanglewood is perfect for that, right? There's like very low bar for entry there. You just need a picnic, right, and a chair. But that's, you know, it's in the Berkshires. It's not exactly like close to Boston, especially for people who like can't get there. So one of the things like the BSO in residence was doing up until I guess it was 2019 summer, they'd hire like one of those big coaches, like big buses, and they like, you know, people would buy tickets for like ridiculously cheap, and they'd get bussed out to Tanglewood. You could just like hop on the bus and go out, but that's like not feasible for like, you know, expanding that. It's crazy expensive. So you know that's part of it, part of a barrier.
Well, it's so cool to hear that as a member of the orchestra, you're able to take on these projects and get initiatives started and, you
Oh,
know,
I don't
better.
want to take credit for that.
Well, no, I know. I just mean the
But yeah,
the stuff with like Jamaica Plain and stuff like
yeah.
that's really cool to hear that as a single member you can do things
Yeah.
beyond
I
just
mean,
your.
education departments everywhere want people that are involved and care about the work and want to see it done well, right?
Mhm.
Try not to like do people's jobs. That's not, you know, not
Yes.
my gig, but
Yeah.
you know, we have an amazing group of people there. So try to do my best to help them out.
How we finish all of our interviews is advice for our listeners, and that can be something you wish you knew earlier or something that's really helped you along the way, like anything you think would be useful.
I guess so. Thinking about like people interested in studying music and interested in pursuing this as a career, I think now more than ever with you know, this whole situation, like I think it's really important that people choose to go into it um, with their eyes open, right, for what the, you know, fiscal realities are of pursuing music, right? I think that's always a good idea that you have a concept of like what your grown-up life might be like. But I think that um, it's not enough to like master your excerpts and to become like a perfect player. I think that that is not the goal that we should be holding. I think um, if you put out of sight the whole reason you started playing and you don't remember that you are first and foremost a singer, right? You're there to like make a beautiful line and get somebody interested in what you have to say. If you forget that and you only have the perfection and the getting the job and that kind of um, training mentality, if you go too far that other direction, then you've lost track of what you're here for. And I think that, you know, the whole world is like facing like what are we here for at this point. And you know, we're so lucky that we have this like other way of communicating with people and with each other available to us. Not everybody gets to have that, and the more you can kind of lean in that direction, I think the happier and more fulfilled you'll be.
I love that. I think that's great, and it's your advice really lines up with a lot of the other people we've been interviewing. Everybody always their advice always has some kind of aspect of creating, you know, meaning in your life and being a good person and having other things you enjoy in life, and yeah, being more than just the person who plays the instrument. So that's great.
Well, I mean, I think that people are finding that everywhere, no matter what your career is. Like, our culture has spent many years going towards being only defined by your job, your title, or whatever you do. And I think people are finally coming to realize that it's okay to be other things, like, you know, put them up as high as, you know, I am an accountant at Ford Motor Company. You know, there's more to you than that. So that's good. You want to get the job. Don't get me wrong. Like, I want everybody to have health insurance and dental insurance and gainful employment.
Thank you so much for talking with us. This was so great. It was a lovely conversation. We're so
Yes,
glad.
thank you so much. We really enjoyed this.